Hello and welcome to the video for the Wobblefart comp. This is a team composition I've been really excited to play for quite some time, probably like 6 months. I've been looking forward to playing this team and really just haven't been able to find the time to play it or really flesh it out. They weren't really that strong kind of at the end of BFA, but you know, we knew buffs were coming to Shadow Priest. So yeah, this is 4 priests and a demon hunter. You don't need to use a demon hunter for this comp. The demon hunter does bring some nice little additives, and we'll get into that. I must apologize for giving you all a video that's done in time walking. So this is kind of a video I put together last minute. I've had some mixed feelings on this team within the last week. Because I think this team is kind of prone to burnout. It definitely takes a lot of attention, I think, to play this team correctly. And so I rushed the team to 60. I rushed the team through some gear, and now I'm kind of at the point where I think I'm ready to jump back into the team and enjoy them a little bit more. There's a time walking reward for this week that gives 200 item level gear, so that's like a no-brainer. And let's go ahead and get into this overview comp. So Let's talk about the strengths first. I'll try to follow the same format that I used in my DK Paladin video. And the strengths of this team is that it's super fun to play. I mean, just very just fun and interesting and off the beaten path. Like Trinity, super boring to play, but this comp, tons of fun to play. That being said, it's a little bit more difficult too, which also kind of plays into its downside as well. Right, so I mean, comps can be both fun and difficult, but also not be something that you want to sit there and bash your head against either. So not the greatest comp, I would think, for pushing, but a great team to just kind of have in your back pocket. I mean, aside from that, Shadow Priests are just really strong right now. They do some seriously sick damage, and so it's really fun to just kind of burst and what the heck just happened? To burst and destroy things. I guess there's probably a mechanic there that I totally messed up. I did kill him, just want to point that out. I'm gonna go ahead and teleport out of dungeon. And I think this is like objectively the best caster team right now for multiboxing, aside from maybe druids, right? So a lot of the downfalls that you have in other team comps, such as like mixed caster, or if you were to play warlocks, or if you were to play straight mages, you really don't have with Shadow Priests, right? So Shadow Priests really have like 2 dots, which can be cast on 1 button, and then you've got your basic priority like big damage spells, and you've got some burst windows as well. So that plays really well to the Mythic Plus playstyle. But let's talk about the weaknesses of this team, and there really aren't a whole... Like, I know I didn't talk too much about the strengths of this team, and the weaknesses list is kind of long, so I have to apologize. I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression. I think this team is very strong, but their AoE damage is just straight garbage. Mindseer doesn't do anything, and while they're good at like 3 to 4 targets, anything beyond that, they start to struggle a little bit. I'm hoping with more gear, this problem kind of becomes a little less pervasive, but right now it's like very much a problem, and it can be pretty frustrating kind of in the short term. Mindflay can also be annoying to work around, so you actually need a stop casting macro, or you have to jump in order for follow to work. So the API command follow me that everybody uses from EMA doesn't actually work if you're casting with Mindflay, which is again really annoying. Overall, not that big of a deal. And then the damage on the priest is a little bit of a ramp process. You have burst, but it's not really front loaded, and the consequence of that is that in some instances that can just feel really bad. You've got the Shadow Priest and you've got the Demon Hunter. Now the Demon Hunter, really what this character or class really brings to the table is you've got an extra 5% magic damage debuff, which is pretty big. And I don't want to say it's required, because it's certainly not, right? It's 500 damage. If everybody in your group is doing like 2,000 damage per second, I think it ends up being like 400 group damage, so I mean it is significant, but it's probably not gonna like, you know, make or break your comp at all. But it is a super nice to have. I definitely recommend, if you have a Demon Hunter, using one or at least trying it out, particularly if you plan on like really pushing with this team at all. I think otherwise you're just kind of leaving damage on the table. The other thing the Demon Hunter brings is really good kite ability. So with, you know, Infernal Strike, you can kind of leap around and drop damage. It's got pretty good damage output as well as pretty good survivability. So you spawn purple orbs, they heal you, and it's pretty much GG. It's not super complex, which I really enjoy that piece of it. Kind of getting into the Shadow Priest, so I apologize, now that I'm hardware boxing, it's a little bit harder to kind of show different screens, and I don't have strong enough video cards on my potatoes right now to really be able to go, but I'm not using any gear that's too crazy. I've gotten some mythic gear, and when we go to talents, so a couple things to call out here. I'm using, for the most part, these are mostly kind of the baseline, what you'd expect to be the best for Shadow. But you've got Fortress of the Mind, which allows your damage to deal 10% extra damage. That's actually not supposed to be the best pick. Should be using Unfurling Darkness. Body and Soul is a really good talent for just mobility. And I think it's really good for multiboxing too. So if I press like 3, I give Body and Soul to all my priests. If I do Control 3, it does it to my focus target, which is now my tank. So you can see, like, we can charge into battle. We've got a little bit of extra mobility for when I need to move. It's a really solid talent pickup. The next is Misery. So this is a really key integral part of what makes this comp really good as well, is that your Vampiric Touch also applies Shadow Word Pain. So I actually keep Vampiric Touch on a separate button, and I just click on mobs, and I go from mob to mob, and I just cast Vampiric Touch. And then I've got a separate macro that casts everything else through GSE. Now, this talent choice is an interesting one because I actually picked Last Word, which reduces the cooldown of silence. That's totally a situational pick. You definitely could pick up Psychic Horror here. I think Psychic Horror could be really good in certain situations, but for the most part, like, this team lacks the interrupts. I'm mostly going to interrupt from my tank, but I do want to use Silence from time to time, and I'd rather it be available more often than not. The rest of these picks are really kind of standard Shadow Priest picks. Surrender to Madness is a really interesting one, though. So, Surrender to Madness versus Hungering Void. Hungering Void is a very safe pick, but Surrender to Madness, I think, is going to be what's going to elevate this team kind of above and beyond in Mythic Plus. So I think in order to really push this team to its absolute limits, you're going to need to play Surrender to Madness. And Surrender to Madness essentially gives you a like crazy damage boost, giving you your spells to cast more Insanity, and you can cast while moving. But if you don't kill the target within 25 seconds, you pretty much die. So it's pretty much an instant wipe. I think the trick to this will be, like I said, I don't think this is really good right off the bat. I think this is going to get more play later on into the season and into the expansion as we kind of understand the fights a little bit better. I think there's a ton of play here, though. So I'll just go through the final ratings really quickly. So if you watch my DK video, you'll remember that there's 4 basic things that I grade things off of. It's ease, versatility, PvE viability, and PvP viability. So for ease, I put this at 2 out of 5. So while this is a super fun comp to play, it's not that easy to play at the same time. The rotation is largely based around burst, and the survivability is not what it is on other hybrid classes. A large part of being successful with this comp is pressing the right buttons at the right time and having like flawless positioning. There isn't much opportunity to steer the ship back like when mistakes happen. So, you know, on other comps like druids and shamans, it's not as punishing when you make mistakes. You've got chain heal, you've got wild growth, you've got a ton of healing items to you. For Shadow Priest, you've got Vampiric Touch, which you can pretty much use once per boss fight, and then otherwise you've got single target heals, which, while not awful, aren't that great either. So, I think in order to really be good on this team, you have to be flawless and you have to execute well, which is why this team is not that easy to play, and is also why this team is kind of more of a background team and not really that team you're going to be pushing in and week out, unless you're just the kind of player that's flawless, which is not me. For versatility, I also gave this a 2 out of 5. It's not a very versatile comp. You could run this 1 healer plus 3 shadow, or you could run this 4 shadow. You could incorporate a Shadow Priest into a mixed caster team. For the most part, though, unless you want to play 4 shadow, I really probably wouldn't recommend this team. There's no cloth tank, so the loot sharing opportunities are kind of limited. In fact, I've really struggled during the Demon Hunter with this team as a result. For PvE viability, I put this team at a 4 out of 5. And while I don't think this is the best team out there, I do believe this team is very viable. Their burst damage and cooldowns play well to a Mythic Plus playstyle. And compared to other casters, with the exception of maybe Druids, I do believe this is the best option. Now, if you're looking to play a cloth caster team and don't want to go mixed caster, this is your best option, bar none. The problem with Warlocks is that you've got more dots to manage, and so that's either separate buttons or you're clipping dots and leaving a bunch of damage on the table. If you're playing Mage, you've got a ton of procs to deal with that you're probably not getting the most benefit out of, whether you're like hard casting Pyroblast or you're playing some spec like Arcane that just has a ton of cooldowns and buttons. I think at the end of the day, this is your best option. And I also think this team is pretty strong. I think this team could be taken further than an all tank team, although they're really kind of two different sides of the same coin. On the tank side, you'd have a team that's very, very resilient, and on this side, you've got a team that's got a lot of damage. So it really just comes down to how well a player can perform, I think, in terms of which of those two play styles is better. And I think it really depends on the individual. For PvP viability, I've given this team a 1 out of 5. Now, I'm sure this team has some viability in PvP. Shadow Priests have been strong in PvP for almost forever, but I don't really PvP with caster teams. Interact with target, missing isn't great, and even with Mindseer and Mindflay, facing with this team isn't as easy as I'd like to believe it should be. So that pretty much concludes this video.